Welcome back to Midnight Affair Tales. Thank you for joining us. The bullet wasn't supposed to miss. Ethan Cole knew that much. The moment he heard the faint click of a trigger being pulled behind him, his instincts kicked in. Years of Special Forces training had conditioned his body to react before his brain could process danger. He dove forward, rolling into the shadows, his breath steady despite the chaos. The bullet slammed into the wooden beam where his head had been just seconds ago. He should have been dead. His own wife had put a hit on him. Jessica, the woman who had promised to love him in sickness and in health. The woman he had fought to come home to. The woman he had trusted with his life, had tried to take it away. Ethan pressed his back against the cold brick wall, scanning the darkened street. Whoever the shooter was, they weren't amateurs, but they also weren't Special Forces. He could use that to his advantage. His mind raced, not with fear but with a chilling, calculated rage. Why would Jessica do this? And more importantly, who the hell was helping her? 2 months earlier, Jessica Cole stood in the penthouse suite of the Sterling Tower, wearing nothing but an expensive silk robe, her blonde hair tousled from the hands of another man. A man who wasn't her husband. Daniel Lawson, the billionaire real estate tycoon, a man twice Ethan's net worth but none of his honor, watched her with a satisfied smirk. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, the ice clinking against the glass as he leaned back on the luxurious leather couch. "You need to make a decision, baby," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "You know I can give you everything he can't. Money. Power. Freedom." Jessica hesitated, staring out at the Houston skyline. The guilt that once gnawed at her had vanished. Now all she felt was impatience. She was tired of waiting. Tired of sneaking around. Tired of pretending. "I want out," she whispered. "I don't want to be Ethan's wife anymore." Daniel's smirk widened. "Then let's make it happen." Jessica turned to him. "No. Not a divorce. That takes too long. And if we do that, Ethan will always be watching, always interfering. I need a permanent solution." Daniel studied her for a moment, then set his glass down. "You mean?" Jessica nodded, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I want him gone. Forever." Ethan wasn't a fool. Something about Jessica had changed, and he felt it the moment he returned from deployment. She was distant. Cold. She had secrets in her eyes. At first he chalked it up to time apart. He had been gone for 8 months after all. But then little things started adding up. The late-night phone calls she would hang up the second he walked into the room, the new lingerie he never saw her wear for him, the sudden influx of expensive gifts she couldn't explain. A husband might have ignored the signs, but a soldier never did. Ethan started watching her, not as a lover but as an enemy. He hacked into their shared accounts, followed the digital breadcrumbs she thought she had covered. And then he found it, the bank transfers, the offshore account, the encrypted emails to an unknown contact. The message that made his blood run cold. Payment confirmed. Target will be eliminated within the next 72 hours. He closed his laptop and exhaled slowly. Jessica wasn't just cheating. She was trying to kill him. But she had underestimated one thing. He wasn't the kind of man who died easy. Ethan knew he had no time to waste. The contract was already in motion. If he sat still, he'd be dead within days. His military training kicked in. First he vanished. No phone, no credit cards, no traceable movements. Jessica and Daniel thought they had trapped him, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Ethan was a ghost now. He withdrew cash from a hidden offshore account he had built for emergencies, bought a burner phone, and disappeared into Houston's underbelly. The city's crime world ran deep, and Ethan knew exactly where to look for answers. His first stop, Dante "Dagger" Morales, an ex-hitman turned informant. If someone had put a contract out, Dante would know about it. Ethan waited in the shadows behind an abandoned warehouse until Dante showed up, puffing a cigar, his beady eyes scanning for threats. "Cole," Dante smirked. "Didn't expect to see you alive." Ethan didn't smile back. He stepped forward, pressing a knife to Dante's throat. "Who took the contract?" Dante swallowed hard. "Listen, man, you got some serious enemies. The job's already in motion. The guy they hired. He doesn't miss." Ethan's grip tightened. "Give me a name." Dante hesitated, but when he saw the look in Ethan's eyes, the kind that didn't bluff, he cracked. "Viktor Reznikov. Russian. Ex-KGB. Cold-blooded." Ethan nodded, already forming a plan. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to hide. He was going to hunt. Daniel Lawson thought he was untouchable. His billions gave him power, influence, control. But money couldn't protect him from the kind of man Ethan was. The kind of man who didn't forgive betrayal. Ethan stood outside the Grand Lux, an exclusive restaurant where Daniel and Jessica were celebrating their so-called victory. They were laughing, drinking champagne, thinking their little problem had been solved. They had no idea he was watching. Ethan could have taken them out right then and there, a bullet through the glass, quick and clean. But that would be too easy. They needed to suffer first. They needed to know he was coming for them. He slipped a small envelope under the windshield of Daniel's Bentley, then disappeared into the night. Inside the envelope was a single message, written in Jessica's lipstick. You should have made sure I was dead. Across the city, Viktor Reznikov landed at a private airstrip, stepping off a jet like a predator smelling blood. The Russian assassin had seen it all: government coups, political assassinations, high-profile killings. But this one? A former Special Forces soldier? It was a challenge he relished. He lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly as he reviewed Ethan's profile on his phone. The man was a survivor, a warrior trained in counterintelligence, tracking, and urban warfare. Killing him wouldn't be easy. But Viktor loved a good hunt. He dialed a number. Jessica answered on the first ring. Is it done? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Viktor smirked. Not yet. But don't worry, Mrs. Cole. He took a drag of his cigarette. Dead men don't run for long. Ethan had seen men like Viktor before, ruthless, patient, deadly. But the one mistake every killer made was thinking they were the only hunter in the game. As Ethan moved through the underground world of Houston's back alleys and hidden safe houses, he gathered everything he needed. He wouldn't just survive, he would make sure Viktor regretted ever setting foot on U.S. soil. He picked up a stolen car from an old contact, wiped down the fingerprints, and used his military skills to tap into encrypted police radios. He needed to know every move before it happened. Viktor wouldn't expect Ethan to strike first. Meanwhile, Viktor wasn't wasting time. From his luxury hotel suite, the Russian assassin watched Jessica sleep. He had never cared for emotions, love, guilt, regret. To him, Jessica was nothing more than a client. But as he sipped his vodka, he couldn't help but wonder, why was she so afraid? He's just a soldier, she had told him over dinner. A dangerous one, but still just a man. Viktor had smiled, nodding, but now he wasn't so sure. Something about Ethan felt different. And in his line of work, doubts got people killed. Still, a job was a job. And by tomorrow, Ethan Cole would be dead. Or so Viktor thought. Jessica had never been scared of Ethan before. Even when she had fallen out of love with him, even when she had started her affair with Daniel, she had never once believed he would hurt her. Now she wasn't so sure. She kept replaying the note on Daniel's Bentley over and over in her mind. You should have made sure I was dead. The words burned into her brain like a nightmare she couldn't escape. Daniel had laughed it off at first. Babe, relax. He's just trying to scare us. But Jessica knew Ethan. He didn't make threats. He made promises. She downed a glass of wine, her hands shaking. If Viktor failed, if Ethan survived, what would he do to her? Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You really thought you could kill me? Jessica's breath hitched. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Then another text came in. You took everything from me. Now it's my turn. Jessica screamed. Daniel was a man who thought money could solve everything. He had bribed politicians, silenced journalists, and built an empire on power moves. But Ethan wasn't a businessman. He was a soldier. And there wasn't a price tag big enough to stop a man like him. That night, Daniel found out just how wrong he was. His phone rang as he was stepping into his Bentley. Unknown caller. He answered, smirking. I hope this is someone telling me the problem has been taken care of. Silence. Then a voice Daniel never wanted to hear again. You're out of your league, Lawson. Daniel froze. His grip on the phone tightened. Ethan, enjoy your last days of luxury. Because soon, you'll have nothing. The line went dead. Daniel stood there, his mouth dry. For the first time in his life, he felt something he never had before. Fear. Viktor Reznikov had killed dozens of high-profile targets, politicians, warlords, even ex-military operatives. But never someone like Ethan Cole. Sitting in his penthouse suite, Viktor loaded his silencer, his mind calculating his next move. Find the target. Isolate him. Kill him. Simple. But something wasn't right. Ethan had gone off the grid. No credit card activity. No phone signals. No trace of him anywhere. A man running for his life would have made a mistake by now. A call, a purchase, a slip-up. But Ethan wasn't running. He was hunting. Victor's eyes flickered to his laptop. A new message had appeared on his encrypted network. It wasn't from Jessica or Daniel. It was from Ethan. You're not the first assassin I've faced. You won't be the last. But you made one mistake, Victor. You came after the wrong man. Victor's jaw clenched. No target had ever messaged him before. Then his phone rang. Unknown caller. He let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, a recording played. I see you, Reznikov. Victor jumped to his feet, gun drawn. He scanned the room. The penthouse was secure. No alarms triggered. No doors opened. Yet Ethan had eyes on him. For the first time in a long time, Victor felt something foreign. Doubt. But he wasn't ready to die yet. He wasn't running. Ethan wanted to turn the game around? Fine. Victor would set his own trap. Daniel Lawson had built his empire by controlling people. His money bought loyalty. His influence erased problems. But Ethan wasn't a problem money could fix. Daniel sat in his private security office, staring at 6 screens filled with footage from his mansion's surveillance system. Armed guards patrolled every hallway, the gates were locked, and his escape jet was fueled and ready. Yet none of it made him feel safe. He's just a soldier, Daniel muttered under his breath. He doesn't have the power to touch me. His phone buzzed. A private bank alert. His offshore accounts were being frozen. One by one, millions of dollars were vanishing from his control. What the hell? Daniel shouted, scrambling to call his banker. But before he could dial, a new email popped up. From unknown. Subject, no more escapes. Message, all that wealth and you still couldn't buy your way out of this. Enjoy your last few days, Daniel. Daniel's hands trembled. Ethan wasn't just coming after him physically. He was destroying everything he had ever built. Jessica Cole was losing her mind. She had thought this would be easy, get Ethan out of the way, collect the insurance, and live her dream life with Daniel. No. She was trapped. Ethan was alive. Victor had gone silent. Daniel was spiraling. Everything was falling apart. She paced the luxury hotel suite, her nails digging into her palms. Think, Jessica, she whispered. Think. Her eyes darted to Daniel, who sat on the couch, drinking straight from a bottle of whiskey, his usual arrogance crumbling. We need an exit plan, he muttered. Jessica swallowed hard. Victor's handling it, right? Daniel's grip on the bottle tightened. That was the plan. Her stomach dropped. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You really thought you could kill me? Jessica's breath hitched. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Then another text came in. You took everything from me. Now it's my turn. Jessica staggered back, letting out a choked scream. Daniel sat up, his face paling. What? What is it? Jessica's hands shook violently as she turned the screen toward him. Daniel's expression turned to stone. Ethan wasn't just alive. He was coming. Viktor Reznikov had been in countless dangerous situations, but this one felt different. Ethan Cole wasn't just a target. He was a ghost. Sitting in his penthouse, Victor kept his gun close, eyes darting to every shadow. He had underestimated Ethan, and now he was playing defense, a position he hated. A knock at the door made him freeze. His instincts told him not to answer, but he wasn't a coward. Gun drawn, he crept forward and swung the door open. Nothing. Then his phone buzzed. A message. Check the mirror. Victor turned sharply, heart hammering. Across the room, written in the steam of his bathroom mirror, were 3 words. You're already dead. The Russian cursed, spinning in a circle, trying to make sense of how Ethan had gotten in. The penthouse was locked down, security was tight, and yet, Ethan had been inside. For the first time in years, Victor felt hunted. He grabbed his gear and moved fast. He needed to kill Ethan before it was too late. Daniel and Jessica sat in their luxury jet, ready to leave Houston for good. Or so they thought. Daniel poured himself a glass of whiskey, his nerves unraveling. Jessica sat across from him, arms crossed, her face pale. You really think this is going to work? She muttered. Daniel exhaled. We have money. We have power. We'll start over somewhere else. But before he could take a sip, the plane's lights flickered. Jessica stiffened. What was that? The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Sir, we have a situation. Someone hacked the plane's system. Daniel dropped his glass. What do you mean hacked? Before the pilot could respond, the cabin screen switched on. A video feed appeared. Ethan. Sitting in a dimly lit room, he stared directly into the camera. His voice was calm, but his eyes were cold as steel. You don't get to run, Daniel. Jessica's breath hitched. Daniel clenched his fists. Ethan leaned forward. Did you really think I'd let you just disappear? You betrayed me. You put a hit on me. And now? He smirked. Now I'm coming for you. The screen cut to black. The plane's power shut down. Jessica screamed. Daniel knew now, there was no escaping Ethan. Sweating, he barked at the pilot. Fix this. Now. But deep down he knew it didn't matter. Ethan was too smart, too ruthless. He wasn't after their money. He wasn't after a confession. He was after blood. Jessica clutched his arm. We have to do something. Daniel was out of options. His empire was crumbling. His assassin was compromised. And his wife. She looked like she was about to break. Jessica's phone buzzed. Another text. Daniel won't save you. Her heart stopped. She turned to Daniel, her voice a whisper. We're going to die, aren't we? Daniel didn't answer. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't know how to survive. Viktor Reznikov never backed down from a fight. But this wasn't a fight. This was a war, and he was losing. He sat in the back of a black SUV, his hands wrapped tightly around his silencer-equipped pistol, his heartbeat steady, but his mind wasn't. Ethan had gotten inside his penthouse. Impossible. Ethan had tracked him without being seen. Unbelievable. And now Viktor wasn't just hunting. He was being hunted. A voice crackled in through his encrypted earpiece. Daniel. We need this done. Tonight, Daniel growled. The money is doubled if you finish it. Viktor smirked. Money was the last thing on his mind. This was about survival now. He wasn't going down like this. If Ethan wanted to play a game, Viktor would play it better. He cocked his gun and stepped out onto the wet Houston streets. Time to kill a ghost. Jessica Cole was unraveling. Everything was supposed to be perfect. Daniel had promised her a new life, full of luxury and freedom. Ethan was supposed to be gone. Instead, he was closer than ever. Jessica sat on the edge of their luxury hotel bed, gripping a half-empty bottle of wine. Her hands shook. Her mind raced. And then her phone buzzed again. Unknown number, regret it yet? Jessica's throat dried up. She knew who it was. She could almost hear Ethan's voice whispering through the screen. Daniel stormed into the room, his face red with rage. We're getting out of here, he snapped. Viktor will handle it. Jessica let out a bitter laugh. You really think he can? Daniel grabbed her arm, squeezing tight. He doesn't fail. Jessica yanked her arm free. Neither does Ethan. For the first time, Daniel had no response. And for the first time, Jessica realized they were already dead. Ethan didn't just want revenge. He wanted them to feel it. He had been waiting, planning, setting the perfect stage. Now it was time. Sitting in a darkened warehouse, he stared at the blueprint of Daniel's latest safe house. A high-security mansion just outside the city. A perfect fortress. Too bad it was built to keep people out, not keep them in. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed a number. A voice answered. Ready? Ethan smirked. Make sure the cameras are rolling. Jessica and Daniel had taken everything from him, his trust, his love, his life. Now, he was about to take everything from them. Viktor Reznikov was a professional killer. But right now, he felt like prey. He moved carefully through the dark streets, his silencer loaded, his mind calculating every possible move Ethan could make. But something was wrong. Ethan wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting. A street lamp flickered. A shadow moved. Viktor spun around, gun aimed, but no one was there. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Checkmate. Viktor barely had time to react before the explosion rocked the alleyway behind him. His SUV burst into flames, metal flying everywhere. He dove behind a dumpster, heart hammering. Ethan had just turned the game around. This wasn't a target who panicked. This wasn't a man who ran. Ethan Cole was hunting him. Daniel and Jessica were out of options. The mansion was locked down, armed guards, security cameras, bulletproof walls. But Daniel knew none of it mattered. Ethan was coming. Jessica sat on the couch, drinking straight from a bottle of vodka, her eyes hollow. What do we do? Daniel clenched his fists. We stop him before he stops us? Jessica's head snapped up. What do you mean? Daniel grabbed his phone, dialing Victor. But there was no answer. Damn it. He threw the phone against the wall. Jessica's breath was shaky. He's already inside, isn't he? Daniel looked at her. And for the first time he didn't have a plan. Jessica's phone buzzed. Unknown number, you should have run faster. Jessica let out a scream. Ethan wasn't just coming. He was already here. The guards at the mansion were some of the best money could buy. Former military, ex-special forces, but they weren't Ethan. One by one they went dark. Cameras cut out. Guards disappeared. The house fell silent. Daniel stood in the panic room, gun shaking in his hands. Jessica was crying, her mascara running. We have to get out of here. Daniel grabbed her shoulders, his voice low. There is no out. A single gunshot echoed through the house. Then another. Jessica screamed. Daniel grabbed his gun, his pulse pounding. He aimed it at the steel-reinforced panic room door. Then the worst sound of all. A slow knock. 3 times. Then Ethan's voice. You really thought a panic room would save you? Jessica collapsed into sobs. Daniel's hands trembled. He pointed his gun at the door. Come and get me, you son of a bitch. The door lock clicked. Ethan was inside. The moment the panic room door creaked open, Daniel fired. The gunshot rang out like thunder in the enclosed space, the bullet slamming into the reinforced wall, but Ethan was already moving. Before Daniel could fire again, Ethan was on him. A brutal punch to the jaw sent Daniel sprawling to the ground. His gun slid across the floor, out of reach. Jessica screamed, backing into the corner, her entire body trembling. Ethan didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on Daniel. You stole my wife, Ethan said, his voice ice cold. You stole my life. And then you tried to steal my future. Daniel wiped the blood from his lip, laughing nervously. You think killing me will fix any of that? Ethan grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the steel wall. Daniel let out a strangled gasp, his confidence shattering in an instant. This isn't about fixing anything, Ethan whispered. This is about making sure you suffer. Jessica sobbed, pressing herself into the wall, her hands shaking. Ethan, please? Crack. Ethan's fist collided with Daniel's face again, breaking his nose. Blood splattered onto the white marble floor. Daniel groaned, barely able to lift his head. Jessica watched in horror. This wasn't the Ethan she remembered. This was a monster she had created. Jessica had never begged for anything in her life. Not for love. Not for money. Not for Daniel. But as Ethan picked up Daniel's gun, checking the chamber, she knew this was it. This was the end. She fell to her knees, tears pouring down her face. Ethan, please, please don't do this. He finally looked at her. For the first time in years, she saw the man she had married. The man she had betrayed. Why, Jessica? Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. Why did you do it? Jessica's breath hitched. Because I wanted more. Because I was selfish. Because I was weak. But she couldn't say any of that. Instead, she choked out the only thing that might save her. I still love you. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. But it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was cold. Merciless. Final. You should have thought of that before you tried to kill me. Jessica's heart stopped. Daniel lunged for his gun. A final, desperate move. But Ethan was faster. Boom. The gunshot echoed through the panic room and Daniel collapsed, clutching his stomach, his hands soaked in blood. He gasped, struggling to breathe, his body twitching as he realized. It was over. Jessica let out a blood-curdling scream, scrambling toward Daniel, but Ethan grabbed her wrist, yanking her back. You don't get to cry, Ethan said. His grip was iron. Jessica's breath came in shaky gasps, her mind racing. What was he going to do to her? Please, she whispered. Please, Ethan. I'll do anything. Ethan tilted his head. Considering. Then he leaned in close and whispered in her ear. That's the problem, Jessica. You'll do anything. Jessica sobbed harder, shaking her head. I'll fix this. I swear I. Ethan pressed the gun to her forehead. Click. Jessica screamed. But no bullet came. Just an empty chamber. Her body sagged with relief, until she looked at Ethan's face. He had never planned to kill her. That would have been too easy. Instead, Ethan leaned down to Daniel's body, pulled out a USB drive and held it up. "I've been tracking every illegal deal, every offshore account, every dirty transaction you and Daniel made," he said, slipping it into his pocket. "By tomorrow morning, the FBI will have everything." Jessica's breath hitched. "No," she whispered. "Oh yes," Ethan said, stepping toward the door. "You're going to rot in a cell, Jessica. For life. And the best part?" He turned, flashing a cold, satisfied smile. "You'll have no one left to blame but yourself." Jessica let out a piercing scream as Ethan stepped out, locking the door behind him. Jessica clawed at the locked panic room door, her screams bouncing off the steel walls. She was trapped. Daniel's lifeless body lay at her feet, his eyes frozen in terror. Blood pooled around him, soaking into the pristine marble floor. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Jessica backed away, her mind racing. There had to be a way out. She grabbed her phone. Dead. No signal. Ethan had planned everything. Her breath came in short gasps. She was going to prison. No money. No power. Nothing. A noise outside the room made her flinch. The police. They were coming for her. Ethan had made sure of that. She slid down the wall, arms wrapped around herself, sobbing. She had betrayed the wrong man. Ethan walked through the front doors of the mansion, the cold night air hitting his face. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered as the FBI stormed the estate. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. Jessica was their problem now. A suited agent approached him. "Mr. Cole?" Ethan handed over the USB drive. "Everything you need is on there. Offshore accounts. Bribery records. Murder-for-hire attempts." The agent flipped open his laptop, scanned the files, then whistled low. "This is enough to bury her." Ethan nodded. "That's the idea." The agent studied him for a moment. "You sure you don't want to stick around?" Ethan smirked. "No need." He turned toward his truck, his voice steady. "I already won." As he drove off, leaving the mansion behind, he felt nothing. Not relief. Not anger. Not regret. Jessica had made her choice. And now, she'd have to live with it. Jessica sat in the interrogation room, her hands cuffed to the table. The FBI files were spread out before her. Every dirty secret. Every crime. Every betrayal. The agent across from her leaned back, arms crossed. "You really thought you'd get away with it?" Jessica said nothing. Her mind was spinning. She had no lawyer. No money. No Daniel. No one left to save her. Her hands trembled as she looked at the USB drive on the table. Ethan had been watching her for months. Waiting. Planning. She swallowed hard. "What happens now?" The agent smirked. "Prison. For life." Jessica collapsed in on herself, letting out a silent scream. She wasn't a billionaire's lover anymore. She wasn't a trophy wife. She was nothing. Jessica had never truly known fear until now. Sitting in the back of an FBI transport vehicle, her hands cuffed, her designer dress stained with Daniel's dried blood, she finally understood what it meant to lose everything. The agent sitting across from her didn't speak. He didn't need to. The evidence was airtight. The files Ethan had handed over had sealed her fate before she even stepped out of that panic room. Her heart pounded as the vehicle turned a sharp corner, the city lights fading behind her. She wasn't being taken to a county jail. This was federal. Jessica swallowed hard, trying to control her breathing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be on a private island by now, sipping champagne with Daniel, spending Ethan's insurance money. Instead, Daniel was rotting in a pool of his own blood, and she was being hauled off to a maximum security prison. Her phone buzzed. Oh. Her hands were cuffed, but the agent pulled it from his pocket, reading the message with a smirk. "Unknown number. Welcome to hell, Jessica. You earned it." Her breath caught in her throat. It was Ethan. He was still watching. Jessica let out a scream, yanking at the cuffs, but there was no escape. Not this time. 2 weeks later. Ethan had no reason to see her. But he wanted closure. The prison visitation room was cold, gray, lifeless. Just like the woman sitting across from him. Jessica looked different. The once flawless, pampered socialite was now pale, her blonde hair tangled, her face hollow from stress and sleepless nights. She lifted her gaze, and for a moment Ethan saw something unexpected. Not anger. Not defiance. Just emptiness. "You came," Jessica finally whispered. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I wanted to see it for myself. See what happens when a liar, a cheater, and a murderer loses everything. Jessica flinched, looking away. I loved you, Ethan. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan chuckled, a dark, hollow laugh. No, Jessica. You loved what I gave you. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to replace me. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. He leaned forward. Tell me, was it worth it? The money, the power, Daniel? Jessica closed her eyes as if she could block out reality. Then, for the first time in her life, she was honest. No. Ethan stared at her for a moment before standing. Good. Now you can sit in this prison and think about that for the rest of your life. He turned and walked away, never looking back. Jessica sat alone, the weight of her own destruction crushing her. For the first time ever, there was no way out. Daniel was dead. Jessica was in prison. And the Lawson empire? Gone. The FBI had seized everything. Offshore accounts were drained, businesses were shut down, and former allies scrambled to cut ties. Headlines flashed across every news station. Billionaire Daniel Lawson assassinated. Wife arrested in murder-for-hire plot. Disgraced socialite Jessica Cole faces life in prison. Ex-Green Beret Ethan Cole survives hit ordered by wife and lover. Ethan watched from the quiet safety of his cabin, far from the noise of Houston, sipping a beer as he flipped through the channels. It was over. For the first time in months he felt peace. No more looking over his shoulder. No more betrayals, lies, or near-death escapes. Just silence. And yet, as he stared out into the vast wilderness, he couldn't help but wonder. Was this really the end? Or had Jessica left one last loose end waiting in the shadows? Fire Jessica is destroyed, Daniel's empire is crumbling, and Ethan has walked away victorious. But is the war truly over? Or is there one last twist waiting for him? Ethan should have felt peace. He had won. Jessica was rotting in a cell, Daniel was 6 feet under, and the Lawson empire was in ruins. But something still felt unfinished. He sat on the porch of his remote cabin, a cold beer in hand, the Texas night stretching out around him. Silence. No assassins in the dark. No whispered threats from a woman he once trusted. Just the wind and the sound of his own breathing. And yet, something nagged at him. He had learned long ago that true enemies never died easy. His phone vibrated. A single anonymous message. You think it's over? The real enemy is still out there. Ethan's grip on the bottle tightened. His mind instantly went into combat mode. Who the hell sent this? He scanned the number, untraceable. His contacts at the FBI would be able to dig deeper, but Ethan didn't need them to tell him one thing. Someone wasn't finished. Was it a leftover piece of Daniel's empire? A hidden ally of Jessica's? Or had he simply missed something? One thing was certain. Ethan Cole wasn't done fighting just yet. 3 states away, inside a dimly lit motel room, a man poured himself a glass of whiskey, smirking at the news report. Jessica Cole sentenced to life in prison. The smirk widened. Good. But that dumb woman was never the real mastermind. She was just the distraction. The real power behind Daniel Lawson's empire still breathed. And he was coming for Ethan. He took a slow sip, letting the burn settle. He had been watching from the sidelines, letting Jessica and Daniel take the fall. But Ethan? Ethan had gone too far. The TV flickered, switching to another breaking story. Billionaire accounts drained. Hidden offshore funds linked to unidentified partner. The man chuckled. Ethan thought he had erased all of them. He leaned forward, pulling a black pistol from the drawer, checking the clip. Time to finish this myself. His phone buzzed. A single new message. Unknown number. He's at the cabin. Alone. The smirk returned. Perfect. The crunch of gravel outside Ethan's cabin was the first sign. He had been waiting. Sitting in the dark, his Glock loaded, his knife strapped to his ankle, Ethan knew this wasn't over. The message, the warning, the lingering loose end? He felt it in his gut. The enemy had finally come. Through the cabin window, he saw the figure moving toward the porch, stepping carefully, trained. This wasn't a hired thug. This was someone who knew how to kill. Ethan's heartbeat stayed steady. He was ready. The footsteps stopped at the door. Silence. Then, boom. A single, powerful kick blasted the cabin door open, and the man stepped inside, gun raised. Ethan was already moving. A gunshot rang out, but Ethan was faster. He slammed into the intruder, knocking the gun aside, sending it clattering to the floor. The man swung, but Ethan blocked, countered, and drove his elbow into his ribs. The attacker grunted, staggering back, but he didn't fall. Ethan saw the face now, sharp, hardened, dangerous. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan growled. The man grinned through bloody teeth. "The one you didn't see coming?" They lunged at each other. A brutal fight, no mercy, no hesitation. They slammed into walls, shattered furniture, and rolled across the wooden floor. Pure survival. The man reached for his knife, but Ethan was faster. With a quick, vicious twist, Ethan grabbed the blade and drove it straight into the attacker's chest. The man gasped, staggering backward, eyes wide in shock. "You," he choked. Ethan twisted the knife one last time. Game over? The man collapsed to the ground. Dead. Epilogue. Peace at last. The sun was rising as Ethan stood on his porch, staring at the blood-stained floor of his cabin. It was finally over. Jessica was locked away for life. Daniel was gone. And whoever had been pulling the strings now lay in the dirt. For the first time in months he exhaled. No more threats. No more betrayal. No more running. Ethan grabbed his duffel bag, threw it in his truck, and took one last look at the cabin. This chapter of his life was done. As he drove off, leaving it all behind, he smiled for the first time in a long time. He had survived. And now, it was time to live. What would you have done in Ethan's place? If the person you trusted the most betrayed you in the worst way possible, would you take revenge, or walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive, fight, or destroy everything like Ethan did?